Moving on, we have a keynote on Martech leaders breaking through 2022 by Steve Locke. He leads Martech capability as Senior Director at Bain Company, helping Global 500 companies across EMEA in CPG, retail, and FS with Martech strategy and growth transformation. He's also operated as the global head of Martech in multiple leadership roles at The Economist, Freshfields, and Media Monks, earning a number of awards, including a Cannes Lions Gold in creative effectiveness and data strategy. And with 25 years of solving problems, Steve is always seeking new ways to do things better. Please put your hands together for Steve Locke. After you.
Hey, everyone. So, if you can believe, we are in the second age of Martech now. And this second age is driven by engineering experts and ecosystems. Usually if I point it, there we go.
Check the batteries.
But anyway, so I was saying, so we're in the second age of Martech. And what we're looking at with some of these key learnings in 2022 is ultimately that we're looking at more of the same, but it's still more on top of more on top of more. So increasing complexity is actually the name of the game for what we're looking at in Martech now in 2022. And so I wanted to be able to present to you today some ideas and research and insights on actually who's doing it well today and actually what the impacts are. Great. So I've got some insights from a really great study that we did with more than 100 enterprise consumer product companies globally, which we started in 2021. October also happens to be the day that I started working at Bain as well. That continues into today. And so some of these major trends that we're looking at is that consumer trends continue to drive innovation and operations inside of the organization. And we see a lot of impact inside of media share. We also see impacts on consumer recall, and we see really, really big impacts on exactly what that looks like against programmatic spend. Probably a bunch of this stuff is not that, new for you guys. So let's dig deeper into some of these areas. But first of all, inside of that $120 billion that is spent on programmatic, we actually see more than half of that in non-working media spend these days. And inside of that non-media working spend, 20% we find actually dedicated to technology, with that growing to an expected 35 to 40% over the next 5 years. So for anyone that has the ability to actually develop some D2C relationships with their consumers, whether that's first-party based, whether that's third-party based, what we can actually see now is that Martech leaders in this space have actually gained market share exclusively, while laggards have specifically lost consumers in this space. So if you need a slide to take back to actually show some critical ROI, this is it. But it's probably have a bunch more of these, which will be shared with you that you can use after this. We're really looking at that true age of Martech enablement. So with that, what are the kind of external challenges that we're actually looking at Martech to help us solve today? Again, I'm sure that a lot of this is not of any surprise to lots of the folks in this space, whether you're on the technology and core technology side or in the marketing side. But we see an incredible redundancy and overlap in the 10,000 tools that we're looking at today in that MarTech landscape. We're also looking at segments that are old as soon as you create them. And we're seeing a huge 6x increase in just the amount of data that's generated in volume from what we were looking at just a few years ago. And we're looking at a 5 to 20% demand in the increase in MarTech skill sets and the people that we need to actually run this stuff and actually do it successfully. But if we focus for a second, the most problematic so far seems to be making sense of the 10,000 tools that exist in the Martech landscape. So in 2022, we have revamped the number of platforms that we're actually looking at, and we've reached, almost 10,000 by the time we put this together, but now I'm sure it's more than 10K. But solving this is core to even why I have a job, or any Martech person really has a job. But it's also really key for why there needs to be a space for creating an actual Martech strategy outside of just an IT strategy and outside of just a marketing strategy. That Martech strategy is important to actually join these two sides together, which we've already heard multiple folks actually talk about from different sides of the coin. And key for that Martech strategy is to actually help us know what's relevant to your particular company's growth strategy of the client or the brand that you're working on. We have to see, also I want to point out here that leading in the space are shown to actually, ironically, maybe have fewer tools that are more impactful. And we see that laggards in this space actually have a lot more tools, but a lot less alignment in what they're trying to approach from a Martech basis. So the major trends that are really driving this change and ultimately innovation in marketing, we see 4 areas that are really continue to push forward. The first one that I think I'm particularly excited about is the creative automation piece. The creative automation piece is really about blending dynamic content generation and workflow management and pushing into areas with DAMs and creating markets where we see lots of the leading kind of digital asset management players today. And of course, second, we have the CDPs and the integration of customer data, particularly driving BAU channels. Third, of course, we have AI and ML that's really directly being embedded inside of the decision-making machinery. And those who are doing it also we see are actually winning in the space. And then of course lastly there's, and definitely not least, is the first-party data transition that runs right head first into data privacy, what's happening from a regulation perspective, and really the concept that you really need a global strategy with local execution capability so that you maintain a level of agility when you're really looking at how to do this on a global scale. So another slide that I find effective that I actually use to rally the CTOs and the CIOs that I work with, so I also work on that side and not just the marketing side, is really to show how foundational it is to have enterprise technology and the enterprise technology strategy, at the center of actually making Martech work when you're trying to scale. We really need it in the architecture, but we also need the partnerships with marketing internally for a different set of internal stakeholders and a different set of internal users with very different expectations sometimes as to what exactly technology is and how to make Martech work and who owns different parts of it. But this is really core to what companies still need to solve and is really a key unlock for making Martech sing inside of your organization. So when we don't solve this, we start to see some common struggles here that some of these may actually resonate with you. But we have Martech strategy that really isn't driven by consumer KPIs, or in many of these cases, we need new KPIs that are softer, integrated KPIs between technology and marketing. We see adoption issues. There are overlapping and confusing capabilities when we're looking at this massive 10,000 tool ecosystem that we're trying to figure out. But we're also seeing these integration issues when we don't have data governance in place to be able to scale and to be able to really actually open up the capability for us to do interesting things at the sides when Martech folks and marketing folks want to use lots of different tools that are fit for purpose and honestly doing really cool things. So the last kind of bit that really resonates here with me in particular, because I'm really trying to solve this myself, is the scarce talent that exists and a real look at, lagging organizations don't really have a lot of internally built ecosystems to actually skill up their people on the marketing side into MarTech and what that actually means to create that literacy. So, great. Actually, Brent said it earlier. So you secured, actually it was Ravi who said, you secured your budget, right? So then, how best to actually spend it, right? So we see from the study that we actually ran through that we have some insights. There are 7 best practices that really differentiate the leaders in their MarTech strategy. So again, adoption first, number 1. Secondly, the core technology and data architecture actually works to build the foundational layer, but with that actually surfaces common standards in the forms of APIs and standard taxonomies that can be worked with to democratize the data. We also aggregate and create a data transparency into the customer data entity. Sometimes we call it a profile, sometimes it's a CDP piece, sometimes it sits in Snowflake, sometimes it sits in AWS. I mean, whatever that customer data entity is that you're talking about is where we need to create some transparency and access. Also, a global and a local approach when you are a global entity that really involves devolved autonomy so that you can actually execute on what you need to from a local basis, whether that's regulation-based or just simply culturally based. We also look at the establishment of a MarTech Center of Excellence that really drives governance and transparency and shares capabilities as they become available. And then we align, lastly, on a common capability framework and being quite MarTech strategy focused first to make these things actually work for everyone. So I want to take just a small dive into what that investment actually looks like. We're seeing from a net revenue basis that we're growing to 2.6% in terms of the full investment into technology. And the largest spend of that tech is actually has grown into the marketing and sales. But critically, it's not just about spending more, but actually about spending better. And leaders consistently focus their investment on MarTech and spending better into this. And so first, how do you do that? What does that actually look like? Well, when we're looking at adoption, the data also shows that the leaders really are pushing into a use case focused enablement and adoption strategy, and is commonly cited as a huge challenge to actually unlock, but is completely worth it if you can approach it and actually look at this particular solve. And I want to mention that also that leaders architect their stack around complexity. Right, this is not about trying to set it and forget it, do it once from a core IT perspective, and then let marketing kind of do its own thing, but a real partnership to actually create to create and surface the kind of data that's necessary through APIs, through standards, through governance with the rest of the organization so that marketing can do what it needs to do, but it can roll back up into the foundational piece. And the nature and the enablement of the competitiveness in MarTech is really key to actually solve these advanced use cases to do, again, the really cool stuff that ultimately we want to do as marketers. So diving deeper into exactly what I mean when I'm talking about building for complexity is that this is a shift in mindset, right, from an aggregation mindset into an aggregation mindset from a consolidation mindset. So it's not just about taking a more traditional tech approach at simplifying for the sake of actually making this easier to manage, but instead doing the kind of hard work that really creates an enablement layer for applications to actually harmonize on. The end-to-end view here is a major differentiator in leaders in this space. So being able to do this and being able to get to this point is a huge enabler for trying to scale the kinds of innovations that we're trying to create inside of Martech. And along with this, and I think particularly with focus where we are here, is understanding that really opens up the ability for us to operate in a local market basis and have that actually roll up and maintain the agility on that local market piece. And then with more and more dedicated MarTech experts embedded internally, I think for me one of the big pieces here is that the majority of winners in this space actually have more than 10 MarTech-enabled people internally to their organizations. So this isn't just about pulling in extra help and external help from the outside, but really about spending on the development of skill-up programs internally is a major unlock for how to do this well. And then finally, one of the biggest differentiators that we see between leaders and laggards in this space is we have leaders building a MarTech strategy and roadmap with alignment with a marketing strategy as well as the enterprise technology strategy as well. And so with these aligned use cases actually driving strategic thinking, we can enable all kinds of core capabilities that we're talking about. And we can see from a MarTech enabler basis that the importance of MarTech platforms, MarTech people, and MarTech process are really key in actually making any of these things work for anyone from the top. So I suggest how to get there. Do a kind of a critical kind of X-ray into your MarTech and map the maturity of where you are in some key areas, and then prioritize and align on a top-down business case with the marketing organization and the core technology organization that we're looking at. Because where you can actually make a plan for your next stage of MarTech maturity, you can start to actually really look at the kind of capabilities that matter to your organization, and you can take this as a template for showing that you have an idea of actually how to move the needle on the next things that you want to do. And if you bring it back to the consumer focus, you can map out the kind of consumer touch points that are really, really key for your organization and look at your ability to execute against these use cases and influence these touch points by leveraging the kind of capabilities that you have in your organization. And this map is going to look different for everyone, and that's the key, is that there's absolutely no one-size-fits-all, but getting to that point so that you can actually see what the shape of your organization looks like in this case is really, really important. And out of this, you can create an actual improvement roadmap. So these are real improvements on the ground that are anchored in solving these real use cases that you have really mapped out procedurally to this point. And you can start to talk about these things actually really mean when whether you're talking about orchestration, and start to really take that and build that out into what that means for your organization, what you're trying to do and what you're trying to change, or what personalization actually means, to the customer and to the internal stakeholders that you have. And so I'll leave you with some more encouraging closing thoughts on the real impact. And we've really seen that on different metrics that you can talk about. And some of these are foundational core IT metrics. Some of these are marketing metrics. And some of these are actually new combined hybrid metrics that are a bit softer, but really talk about the impact of MarTech and what you're trying to do with that investment. So hopefully you can take some of this to talk about when you're actually getting this right. You can see who's actually getting this right and what kind of impact has been proven in the marketplace. And hopefully this will help you actually break through 2022 with your MarTech. Thank you.